Hey y'all, welcome back to the lab. In this video, we're going to be talking about my multi-computer work-from-home productivity desk setup as a software engineer and YouTuber. So I live in Manhattan in New York City. I work as a software engineer and I run a YouTube channel in my free time. I have an 8-foot by 8-foot office with no windows that I've worked remotely in for the last 4 years. And here we'll dive into how I've set it up to maximize my space and productivity. First, I want to touch on a few goals that my office has. So the first is it needs to be simple. I want it to be relatively easy to create and reproduce with available materials. We move apartments semi-regularly and I often want to try out a new piece of equipment, and so I find that being very simple makes it easier to change and rearrange. Although this does mean that a lot of my stuff isn't the highest tech, it's not going to look the greatest because I don't feel it's worth putting in that time. The second goal is to be ergonomic. It needs to feel good to use for several hours each day. I'm usually at my desk for 8 hours a day, so I want to avoid as many issues as possible. Anything from like pains to like arthritis in your hand or like neck problems. Like these are all things that happen if your desk isn't set up right. And I know I'm going to be doing 8 hours a day probably for the rest of my life or as long as I can. And so the more I can keep those away, the better it is going to be for me long term. And the third is to be productive. I do want it to handle my most common tasks efficiently so that I can stay productive and reduce any kind of frustration that I might have. And so in short, this needs to be a simple, scalable system to support my daily creative work long term. Office use cases. So this is a home office that must support several different creative endeavors that, I like to do. The first is that it needs to support both my personal work and my career work, things I get paid to do. Now I have both a personal and work computer that I use, and so I employ a KVM switch to make it easy to switch which computer is attached to my monitors and peripherals, and also so that I'm not messing with plugs and stuff like that. The next is it needs to do coding and writing. I use a vertical monitor for my primary workloads and my horizontal monitor for my secondary workloads. Typically things I'm focused on and producing are on the vertical, and things that I'm kind of referencing are on the horizontal. I also create YouTube videos, so I make a lot of programming videos here on the channel, and so my office doubles as a recording studio with a camera, mic, and light, and recording can often be a hassle. It has a lot of peripherals, and so I've kind of tried to set it up to be as easy as possible to get going. And finally, extra storage. Our apartment is not very big, and so I'm already pretty lucky to get this much space for my office. And the compromise is that I do hold a lot of small things in storage. So, I have the printer, I have a bunch of extra cords and electronics, boxes, paper supplies, etc. are all kind of in here in the background, right off screen, so you can't see it. And here is a view of my desk setup here. And I'll keep this picture here on the left so that we can reference it. Maybe I'll do it on the right here. And so my monitors are arranged with the vertical monitor in the center, as we can see, horizontal monitor on the right side, and room for a laptop on the left. And I found this setup to be very ergonomic and productive for my primary creative outlets, which is often just digital. And so my middle vertical monitor is really my primary editor. And this is, again, usually code or a document that I'm writing, for instance, this blog post, I write it in my editor, push it up to my website, and then read it off here. And I find it helps to keep me focused on the main output when I have my vertical thing kind of separated from many of my reference materials. And I often actually find that code and writing essays and things like that actually work better in a vertical format because it's, we read up to down, we don't read left to right, our vision doesn't work that way. And so that's what I found to be more productive for myself. Now on the right monitor, I usually have two windows that are tiled. Windows is pretty good at this. On Mac, you can do this with, I think I use Rectangle as the tiling manager. And then Linux is also pretty good about this. And I usually will have notes on this leftmost pane and then references or things that I'm researching on the rightmost pane. And that's typically how I do 70, 80% of my computer work. And then finally on the left, we have my work laptop. And when this is on, I do keep the screen on, and usually I just hold tabs that I might want to reference regularly. So if I have a ticket open and I'm waiting on someone to respond, I might keep that open. Or if I have a few PRs that I'm, waiting on getting reviews for, I'll keep those so that I can kind of look back on it when I have some free time. But usually I don't do a majority of my work on there. It's really just for reference if I need it. Now for more on this kind of setup and why I use it, you can check out this blog post where I dive into this more. Okay, next let's talk about some common features in the desk setup, so things that work for kind of all of the different modes and things that I'm using this for. So the first is my desk. This is an Uplift Standing Desk V2 Commercial, and it's a 60 by 30, which I think is 5 foot by 2.5 feet deep. And it is a standing desk. Here in the bottom, you can kind of see these little buttons, and that does raise and lower, but I personally don't actually use the standing functionality that much. But I still like it because it allows for adjustments up and down. And what I've actually found is for desks that don't have adjustments, they're actually at the wrong height. They're too tall to have like an ergonomic setup. And so I actually prefer the standing desk so that I can adjust it lower than most desks actually go to actually get those kind of 90 degrees ergonomic setups. Now for my chair, which you can't really see, this is my Herman Miller Aeron B Medium. It is pretty expensive, but I do find it to be pretty comfortable. And my guess is that there probably are better and more comfortable chairs out there for cheaper, but this is the best I could find a few years ago, and I'm pretty happy with it, so I've just stuck with it. Now, I will say that I can't sit in it for more than 4 hours at a time without getting up, but I think maybe that's a good thing because really you shouldn't be sitting down for that long, without walking around. But if that's something you're looking for, I don't know if you're like a marathon gamer or something, then you might look for a different kind of chair. The next is my mouse, which you can see here, and I'm using right here. This is the Logitech MX Master 3S, and this is my favorite mouse by far. It feels really good. It's not too large. I do have a little carrying case for it, and I bring it in my backpack. I have one in there for on the road. And it has a scroll wheel on top. It has a horizontal scroll wheel, and it also has these two buttons for going forward and back, which I use pretty frequently, both in my coding editor, but also, when I'm in web browsers or things that support it. And I also like that it has the USB-C recharger, and as we'll talk about, I have chargers on my desk, and so I never have to worry about running out of batteries. If it ever shows the little red light in the corner, which means that it's running out of power, I just plug it in real fast, and, I never have a problem with it. So I'd highly recommend this mouse. I really like them a lot. Now for my keyboard here, which you can see on the right side on this black and red thing, it's the Keychron Q1 Max with the knob and Gatoron Jupiter banana keys. And I like the 65% keyboard layout because it's smaller and like you're kind of holding your hands like this, for your keys, but then you have to go over to the mouse. Anything over 65%, your hands kind of start going more, and I think it leads more to kind of like arthritis and like, whatever continual motion problems. And so I think 65% is the perfect layout for most things. If you have to like do numbers a lot because you're like an accountant or something, then maybe you want the larger one with the numpad, but like as a software engineer, I basically never need to do that. And then I really like the volume knob just for making things easy. Like if I'm on a Zoom or watching videos, I can quickly just use the knob like this. It's always there, easy to access, which is a motion that I do very frequently, and I found that I really like having a knob for that. And I actually went through like several keyboards and kind of different kinds of keycaps, or whatever the thing under the keycap is called, to try and find the right amount of thock. And I definitely have found that. Like I love the thock on this thing, but I would just caution that these banana keys, these yellows, are like pretty loud. And so I think, if I start typing, you can probably hear this. So it is just like pretty loud, and I think you can hear it on like Zooms, and you can definitely hear it if I'm on like a regular call because my phone doesn't do like the noise canceling right or something like that. And so if you're like in a busy workplace or you're working with other people, like you probably will want a more quiet keycap. But for me, working from home in my own office, this is like pretty great, and I love typing on it. All right, now we'll talk about my monitors here. They're really not anything that special. What I do like about them is that they're a pretty good size. Both of these are 27 inches, and they're 1440p. And so 27 inch, I think, is large enough to kind of fit everything on the screen easily. And so you see I have this in vertical layout, but I do need some horizontal parts for just things that VS Code has. And so having a few extra inches of horizontal space is really important for that. And then also, even when I'm doing horizontal, I do like having two panes on my monitor, and so I find 27 inches like a good size for that as well. And then for me personally, like doing things like gaming, I understand why people want 4K, but I personally don't really care. Like the difference between like 1440p and 4K is like non-existent for me. It doesn't really matter, but the extra compute power needed for that in terms of like the GPU and stuff is actually quite higher. And so I find 1440 is actually perfect for whether it's gaming or having good resolution on, my different tabs, having the right size. And so I really like this layout. I do have two Dells, which I'll link here. One is curved, one is just like flat, and I like these a lot. They're like pretty good monitors, but I'm really not tied to these specific monitors. What I am pretty tied to is the kind of dimensions and the 1440p, because I think that for me is a really good size for kind of everything that I do. Also have to do a little rant on like the people with the ultrawides. The ultrawides are not ergonomic at all. I don't know who's fooling themselves that like ultra wides are good or stacked monitors are good, because these are like terrible for your neck. Because ultra wide, in order to see something, you're gonna have to keep like moving left to right, which is like a bad motion to do over and over. And then going up and down is also bad. Like, think about it, the last time, I don't know, when you were a kid and you're in like a Toys R Us or like a Walmart or a Target and you're playing those demos and the stupid TV's like up and you play for like 15 minutes and then you stop and your neck hurts. Like, you're doing that to yourself every day with stacked monitors. And so anyone who's doing that, I'm just like, it doesn't really make sense. You should probably avoid it and get something that really limits the amount that you have to go left and right. Chargers. So I have here, you can kind of see it, it's a dock. It's the Anker 60 watt 5-port desktop charger that I keep plugged in, and then I have one of each like common charger that I need. So I have a USB-C, I have a micro USB, and then I have my watches here, the Garmin Fenix has like a special connector for whatever reason, and so I keep that plugged in here, just so that whenever I have something that needs charging, whether it's my headphones or, you know, my mouse or my phone, you know, whatever it is, I can just quickly plug it in there, so I don't have to like worry about messing with chargers or finding what's there, plugging things in or out. And I would highly recommend having something like this, even if you don't have, you know, this one on your desk, because it just saves a lot of hassle. Okay, the KVM switch. So this is something that I think a lot of people don't have, and a lot of people think is too complicated, but it's something that I've used for years, and I think it's really important and really a key part of how my desk is set up and how it works. And you can't really see it in this photo. It's like this flat thing. And let me actually click into this to give you an idea what it looks like. It's this flat thing, and it has these buttons on the front here, these yellow buttons. And when you click the select button, it will just swap which computer is attached. And so basically what I do is I have it's kind of like the core, right? And then I have the monitors connected to it, and then I have each computer connected to it, both its like USBs and its HDMI outs. And then by clicking this button, I can say, do input and output to computer 1 or input and output to computer 2. And what this allows me to do is, instead of like having to reach down there and changing the HDMIs and what's plugged in, I just click the KVM switch, and now it's like personal computer, work computer, personal computer, work computer, which I find super helpful because, you know, I work as a software engineer on the work computer, which means at least once a day, though often more times than once a day, I will need to switch. And this just like minimizes any of the problems I have with that. And there are other KVM switches, but this is the only one I found that allows for two monitors for each, and that has like a USB 3.0, which is useful for some of the newer peripherals you might have. And so that's why I've stuck with this. I've been on the lookout for one that like is maybe better and can do like higher refresh rates and stuff, but this is super reliable. I've had this thing or a version of this thing for like 5-6 years, and I haven't found a better one, so this is just the one that I stick with. Yeah, it's this TE Smart USB 3.0 KVM switch. It looks like, you know, a scam. It looks like a weird generic product, but it's the best one I've found. Now for cord management, a lot of people do like fancy stuff. I really just have the little cord holder that this desk came with. And then I have a pack of these like Velcro organization straps, which just look like this. And they just make it easy to like cinch and then wrap so that it doesn't come undone. So it's like zip ties, but like better because you can undo them, I guess. Or twisties, but easier because you don't have to twist and untwist. You literally just Velcro it. And basically what I do is just, you know, curl up the cords, Velcro them together, and then I really just stash the cords behind here or right under the desk so that it's out of the way mostly, but it's still like easy to change when I inevitably want to like swap something out. The next thing I have this desk, which I think is worth calling out, is this air monitor. I have the AirNet 4 home air monitor. Let's see if you can see that. And basically what it has is it's basically like what is the rate of like carbon dioxide in here, which kind of is like, you know, how much, it's like a proxy for like how much oxygen is in the room. And in general, you want to be below, I think it's like 1,000 or 1,500. And then if you are, then you're in the green. If not, you're in yellow. And then if you're over like, I don't know, 3,000, then you're in red. And this is something I didn't have for a while, but I'm in a small office. And so I used to keep the door closed, and I would feel like pretty hot and uncomfortable and like kind of sweaty a little bit. And I read online about someone who had this, and they noticed that they were kind of suffocating themselves. And I bought this to test it out. And what I found is that when the door was closed, I was like definitely suffocating myself. Like it was in the many thousands. And ever since, I keep the door open, and I actually keep a window in the house open to the outside, because you realize like how maybe not good it is for you to not have real oxygen from the outside, because you're just like breathing in your own breathe outs, I guess. And it's really been awesome. It's helped airflow. I don't feel like that weird suffocation feel, and some studies say it makes you smarter. I think it just makes me calmer because I have more fresh air or whatever. But would highly recommend this just to check out, what your home is like. For a journal, I have this Lecterm 1917 A5 with 120 gram paper, and then I use a Precise V5 pen. Like most of what I do is on the computer, which is great, but I do find that drawing thoughts out or sketching things out sometimes just helps you think better. And so I always have it on hand. I have one here that I keep on my desk full time, and then I have one in my backpack. I have one on the couch where I usually sit. Really love journals. You don't have to get this exact one. This is just one that I like, but I do think having some sort of paper to just jot down thoughts on is really useful. Surge protector. You can't see it in this photo, but it's under the desk. It's where all my things are plugged into. I do think modern electricity is pretty good, so you don't usually have surges, but if you're like me and you have thousands of dollars of peripherals all in, you might as well get one just to protect it, especially because if one accidentally blows out, now you got to wait for the new one to get shipped to you, and it's just really annoying. So I think investing some money in a really good surge protector is great, and I've used these Trip Light ones for years. They're the most highly rated ones. They're definitely overkill for what I'm doing, but worth it, so I don't have to worry about it. Another thing is the noise canceling headphones. So I have my Bose QC3s, I think, on, or 35s, whatever they are. I have several versions of these. I am in a small apartment, so this does mean that there's not much separation between rooms, and so if someone's doing something in the kitchen or watching TV or on a call, you can usually hear some of it. And so even though I work from home, I do have these, and I like them. I do think there's maybe better noise-canceling headphones out there, but these are just ones that I've had good experience with it. And so every few years I'll get a new one, and then, I'll use one for working out and for travel and stuff. And so they work pretty well for me. Okay, final thing on my standard desk setup is my water bottle, which you'll probably see in the videos a lot, in the corner. I'm using the Hydro Flask 32-ounce aluminum water bottle. I'm not really bullish on any kind of water bottle, but I do like this one. But I do think it's important to have water always, because I think, software engineering is creative work. A lot of what you do day to day, you're just a human. So the more you can kind of take care of yourself and your body, the more productive you'll be long term anyway. And so I like this one, but I've had many water bottles in the past, which were fine. I just think it's important to have a water bottle ready so that you can, stay hydrated. And I usually put my water bottles on the left here in the space that is open, and then if I have a tea or another drink, I'll also put it there as well. No eating at my desk though. I really do not eat at my desk. I think that's a great way to get everything sticky, so I probably don't do that. All right, my personal computer is actually under the desk here. You can't really see it, but it's on the floor because it's a big one. And I have the Lenovo Legion Tower 5i Gen 8. I like it, handles all the workloads I throw at it. I'm a really big fan of Lenovo because it has good performance or price to performance ratio, especially compared to other brands or Apple. And it is pretty reliable, and if something's broken, they have a pretty good return policy to return or swap out for another one. And I guess I should mention that at the end of the year, they always have really good deals on stuff from a year or two ago, and I think that's great for getting into really good hardware for a really good price that is very reliable. And so I'm a fan. I think my last 5 or 6 computers have all been Lenovo's and really have not had many problems with it. And something that might be weird to a lot of software engineers is that I do run Windows, and I use Whistle, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux, inside of it for development. And I personally use Windows versus just going straight to Linux because it does gives me access to all of the consumer hardware or software that I want, including the ability to play games without any kind of emulation software in between. So I get kind of the niceties of Linux for coding, but all of the kind of mainstream stuff for any kind of other software I want to use, which I personally like and enjoy. All right, onto my work computer. So here on the right, we can see this is my desk when the work computer is controlling it. Again, I go click the little KVM switch, which is under this thing on the left, and it just turns into the work computer's controlling everything, which means the keyboard and mouse work on it. It's now connected to all of my monitors, so it's really one button click, it runs the whole workstation. Not much to say here. I mean, I have a work computer here, which is usually a MacBook. This one here is the 14-inch MacBook Pro M4, which seems reasonable. I don't buy Macs for myself, but I've never really had a problem with the Mac, so it's fine. And then one thing that I do use for this is I always have a laptop stand. This is the Roost laptop stand. which I used to kind of increase the MacBook to be, or the laptop to be at an ergonomic height so that, again, I just reduce any kind of like strain on my neck from like looking down or whatever. And it is pretty portable. I think they'll show it here. This folds up into like a really small design. And it comes with a carrying case. And so this one is permanently at my desk, but I do have one that I take with me and put on in my backpack whenever I'm like going to work somewhere from the office, just so that I can, again, get kind of the more ergonomic setup. All right, and then here's what it looks like in recording mode. You can see that like not much has changed really, except for, you know, I turn my key light on, I turn my camera on here, I move my mic to be kind of where I'm sitting, and then I have OBS here for actually combining all of these into something that I can turn into like a video, and that's kind of what I upload here on YouTube. And I will say that like I'm optimizing for simplicity here in my process and how I like to do things, but this does have trade-offs in that, like, you know, this isn't going to be the highest quality, whether it's audio or video or even like formats here, right? Like most people who make this video would probably have another camera showing them in their whole setup, but that's like hard to do in this little office. And it's just like way harder, like exponentially harder to do in terms of like work involved in editing. And so I choose to like read off my blog posts and kind of show you static pictures of what it looks like from other angles, because that works better for my process, because I do care about simplicity and the efficiency of this stuff. So this is a huge trade-off that like maybe not everyone wants to do for them, depending on what kind of videos you want to use or whatever. But this works really well for me. And so that's why I've chosen to do this way. Now for the camera, I have a Sony ZV-1 II up here, which is a nice little camera. I used to have like a really big one that was like, you know, more professional, but I found I just had to like, it was too finicky. I had to do all these things to get it kind of right. And then I'm just not super good at that, and I don't really care to do that. So I just went for a smaller camera, and I basically have a USB-C cord, which is this top one, which is permanently plugged in so that it always has power whenever I want it. And then I have a mini HDMI coming out that comes down to a capture card right here, which is what is actually turning this video into like a digital signal so that I can put it into my KVM switch so that any of the computers can use it. For the mic, I'm just using a Blue Yeti mic. You can see here. I've tried a few different mics. I've even tried one of those like analog ones where you need like a what are those volume thingies? And I'm just like not good at that. I don't care about finicky changing it around, and it just like produced worst audio for me out of the box. And so I came back to the Blue Yeti. It's really trustworthy. It's like pretty cheap. It does a good job. It works in any setup. And so remains my go-to for now. For the mic stand, I have this Rode PSA-1 swivel mount, which I think is pretty good because I can like move it up and move it around. I think in my next desk setup, I'll probably put it over here or maybe on the side here, because this one is kind of blocked by my vertical monitor. But, you know, for now it's pretty useful to use, and I think a boom arm is very useful to get it out of the way quickly. For my capture card, which again is back here, I just used the Elgato HD60S Plus. I don't really do anything intense, so I think this is overkill, and I probably could find a way to use the mini HDMI to HDMI and maybe plug it into my KVM switch or just directly into my computer, which would have been simpler and gotten like the same outputs. But personally, this is what I went with, and it works fine for me, so I just haven't really messed with it since then. For the light, which I do think is actually important, is this Elgato key light, and you can't really see this, but it's got like these poles that it comes with, so I can attach it to my desk and kind of raise it and point it wherever I want, which I think is super useful because I don't have to like drill into a wall or like have another thing kind of supporting it, which is good because I don't have the floor space for that. And I've also found that because it has this small pole, it actually works well with the camera and light stands I use, which is this Elgato flex arm thing, which is kind of like a Connects looking thing that you can connect to that original light pole that I have, which is actually how this is supported, this camera, which makes it easy if I need to switch it or move it up or down or whatever. So it's kind of like a little erector set or whatever that's called, which I think is super simple and pretty flexible as well. Nice. So that's how I've set up my desk for work from home productivity as a software engineer. And, you know, it works for me, but it may not work for you, and that's totally okay. Everyone's preferences will be a little different. What is important, I think, is to be mindful about what is and isn't working for you in your setup and making little tweaks over time to see if you can find something just a little bit better. Now, if you like this post, you might also like the best laptop size to maximize productivity for software engineers. You might also be interested in how I plan my day as a senior software engineer, a simple scalable system for getting the most important thing done every day. And finally, what's in my backpack travel edition. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.